All right. Well, I think we're doing this again. I think we were live before. I don't know. YouTube's having problems. Apparently, Facebook is too. Maybe it's an encoder issue. Maybe you can't hear us at all. If not, we'll upload it later. So we'll see. I think I can see us, so I think we're good. But anyways, like I said, thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Dan Mencer. As always, Pastor Clint Goss to my left. Tonight is episode 84 of Faith Connection Live, and we're doing it based on Scripture's 1 Kings, chapter 17, verses 1 through 16, which is the story of Elijah and the ravens and the widow. And that's kind of why we named it the way we did. So if you're not familiar with that, so you want to kind of sum it up? Or
I can.
Yeah, go ahead. You do a better job. I do it like it's still a kid's story. So
Well, it still is. I mean, we take these stories and we think, well, I learned that back in Sunday school or when I was a kid in kids' church or at some kids' crusade or whatever. And we got to understand that these stories are relevant and applicable to us today as adults. They weren't put in the Bible like, okay, we'll have a section that's just kids' stories. You
Right.
know? We'll put David and Goliath there, and we'll put, whoever else, all these other stories that we teach kids in Sunday school. And the reason why they're taught to kids in Sunday school is because the lessons that are learned from them, the application of how they apply to our life is simple and it's teachable and learnable. So it's something that is not complex or difficult, and so that's why we use these. And so we made the decision to take the first Sunday of the month and talk about these stories and how they apply to us as adults today. Mm-hmm. And so this is the one we chose today was the story of Elijah and how that a drought had happened. The first verse kind of tells us that Elijah was declared it, that this would happen, that the drought wouldn't happen until he said it was over, and that there wouldn't be any rain or dew on the earth for as long as until he said it was going to rain again. And God came to him and said, okay, it's time, you're not a popular guy right now, so you need to go somewhere and hide. And he tells him where to go to the brook. And I can't pronounce the name of the brook very well, so we'll just skip that. It's not important.
We'll just call it the brook.
It's not important to the rest, to how it applies to us. But God tells him to go to this brook, and there that God's provision would sustain him, that he could drink from the brook, the water, and that God would send ravens to bring him bread and meat in the morning and in the evening, and that he would be fed there. And it's a screwy instruction, like I go there and wait for ravens to bring me food.
Instead of finding food or a bush that will provide berries for you, or the animals will come and you can hunt them, or when I was young and I remember reading this, I always thought that was kind of like ravens would drop off, because I always wondered like the meat. I was like, was it like picked meat? Because we see ravens
these
now.
These are ravens. I
right.
mean, just the nature of that
right.
bird is a scavenger.
That's what I'm saying. So is the type of meat a scavenged meat? I know I went in way too far when I was young with it, but I always thought that. But he brought him bread and meat to eat. It must have been fine because he ate it. But there was never you think the Bible would have detailed it if it would have been weird, or what I mean? It was just probably normal to me, I guess.
But this is,
and it's ravens.
But this is God's instruction to do this. But later on, the brook dries up because there's a drought, and the brook dries up, and God says, okay, now I'm going to send you somewhere else. I'm going to send you to Zarephath. Mm-hmm. Let's pronounce that 3 times fast. And there, a widow woman's going to provide for you. And so Elijah moves on, and he goes to this town and finds this widow woman. But she's poor. She has nothing. In fact, she says, hey, I'm collecting 2 sticks, and I'm going to start a little fire, and I'm going to make this last
little bread, or it wouldn't even have been bread, just bread and oil, cake thing.
And I'm going to make this last thing, and my son and I, and obviously she's probably going to give all of it to her son, or give a large portion of it to her son, and then we're going to die. That's how she declares it. We're going to cook this little thing, and then we're going to die. So how am I going to give this to you? And Elijah says, well, make me a small cake first, and then do as you said you were going to do. But God has said that your barrel of meal and your cruse of oil, the little jar of oil, will not run dry, and it will sustain you and your household
Until this is passed.
until the drought is over. And so she obeys. She goes and does it, and she is able to feed Elijah and her son and her house. It says her household. We don't know how many people that entails. Whether maybe it's just the three of them, or maybe it's, Aunt Sally and Uncle Bill, and they're
Back
18
then,
kids.
families used to live together. So
and so we don't know how many people were sustained from this barrel of meal and this cruse of oil, but it wouldn't have mattered whether it was 3 or 33. God would have sustained them.
Yep.
So there's lessons to be learned from this. Like, okay, there's the premise of the story is that God tells Elijah to go to the brook. A raven's going to take care of you. Then the brook dries up. Now go to the widow woman, and she'll sustain you. But yet we find out that she has nothing. She's poor. And I'm sure, it's like, I think about from Elijah's standpoint, like how we think of things when we hear something like, okay, our expectation of where we're going. Like if you go on vacation, the expectation.
Disneyland.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, you're motivated.
Right.
I get where you're coming from.
You have an expectation, or you're going to go to the beach, and you have an expectation that, we're going to sit in the sun, and we're going to do all this, and then the whole time you're there, it rains.
Right.
You have expectations of things. So what was his expectation of the widow woman?
Yep.
Oh, I'm going to have this really rich, widow that's going to take care of me, and she's going to have a room for me to stay in, and all this stuff. And he gets there, and she doesn't even have 2 sticks.
Yeah, and
to
he's
rub
like,
together.
she's like, I have 2 sticks. He's like, this is what I have.
Yeah.
But the remarkable thing for me out of this whole thing is how many times people had to obey what God was calling them to do. And some of them are pretty extreme. They're like a lot of times when God calls me to do something in life, it's doable.
Yeah.
It's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's A to B. It's presentable. It's okay. But I've never gotten, hey, you're going to go and be fed by 2 ravens. I'd be like, what? Really? Like, we can't do better than this? Was this plan B, God? Or did somebody fail? Did you actually have 4 people that were supposed to meet me, but they gave up, and now I have ravens because they'll listen to you no matter what? That's what I find it, that Elijah the whole time is like, okay. And then whenever the widow is told by Elijah, hey, bring me a cake first. I feel like the majority of people, maybe it's the American way, I don't know, but I feel like a lot of people wouldn't do that. I feel people would be like, hey, me and mine, and then maybe I'll help you out.
Yeah.
And that's best case scenario, I think, with today's world. And in this case, she goes, oh, okay. Now, I wonder if there was conversations in between there.
Well,
where he's like, God was talking to me, hey, I got
he
to
did.
meet you.
That's what he did.
He did. I read it. I don't remember.
Yeah, and Elijah said to her, do not, this is verse 13, he says, do not fear, go and do as you have said, but make me a small cake from it first, and bring it to me, and afterwards make some for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord God of Israel. So Elijah has declared, okay, these are the instructions
from God.
But here's why I'm giving these instructions, because God has declared the bin of flour shall not be used up, nor shall the jar of oil run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the earth. So she went away and did according to the words of Elijah. So that's one of the lessons that we come away with this. What do we need to have the kind of faith that Elijah and the widow woman had? How do we have that kind of just do it faith? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand the instruction. It doesn't make sense. It's weird. Yep. It's like, but what
it could put us into trouble.
Yeah, well, she's in trouble. I mean,
right, but like taking away from her to give to somebody else, it's like that could even put me further below.
Yeah.
Like we talk about that sometimes whenever, for financials, it's like maybe donate, learn, or go donate your time or donate your money or whatever, and then you'll find the thing that you're looking for in a sense. And that's kind of what occurs there.
And you know that she's in the middle of this drought, and so she knows the meal's running dry. Less and less, the oil's getting lesser and less, and she's coming down to where she knows weeks ahead that this day's coming. And so,
well, she even says that we're going to have our last meal, like pretty much we're going to go die.
Yep.
That's her anticipation of the future.
Right.
That's what tomorrow is bringing.
But she knew this weeks ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know that the pantry's getting low, and there's nowhere to go get it because nobody has anything. We are in the middle
Yeah, there's
of
nothing
a famine.
growing.
We're in the middle.
Animals are probably
Right.
gone because they're going to go find water somewhere else, so they're going to travel where most people won't.
Yep.
So there's nothing. There's literally nothing.
So I'm sure because she is able to be instructed of the Lord to take care of Elijah. In other words, God said to Elijah, I have a widow woman who's going to take care of you because I've instructed her to do that. I have commanded her or instructed her to do this. So she's inquiring of God, let's look at her perspective. I said about Elijah and him thinking about who the widow is going to be. Well, let's take her side of this. And she's probably, she's praying, she's seeking God. God, how do I sustain myself and my son? How do I keep us alive through this mess? And God says, I'm going to send a man of God to you.
So you think that occurred?
And
I feel like that
I
occurred.
want you to take care of him.
Yep.
This is what God said he did. He told her.
Oh, is it in there?
That he has.
I didn't.
He tells Elijah, I have commanded her to take care of you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he does say, I've commanded her, so he did
Yeah, we
talk
don't know.
to her.
I'm reading between
That's
the
what
lines.
but
here.
he did say that I commanded her to do
Right.
it, so she must have already gotten word from God ahead of time. Hey, I'm going to send you somebody, and you need to take care of him when you're asked. And then he comes in and says, hey,
Yep.
I'm here to ask.
But how does he come in? Was her expectation, okay, the man of God's going to come with provision.
Yeah, like the three kings or something.
Yeah, he's going to come
Save
with
me.
food and resources.
Which he
and all
does.
this. And
Through God.
Right.
With the provision of your oil never running out and your grain never running out. But in our
But what was her
humanly
human
expectations,
expectation?
was he in a nice cloak and a hat and riding on a horse, and
with a big
Bur-
cart full of with a big
grain
wagon
and some
full-
meat.
Yeah. And
That's
he
funny.
shows up and he asks for water and for a small cake, and she's like, "What? I'm making our last meal here.
I'm
We're
the
gonna
provider.
die." Yeah.
I'm the provider.
She said, and so their expectations. You wonder what they were really thinking because of human nature. We anticipate what's coming. What the next day is going to bring.
It's like when somebody passes away and you're in their will,
Yeah.
you automatically think like it's this huge thing,
Yeah.
and then it's like, I pass you along my diary. It's like, oh, well, thanks. I mean, that's cool. I'll look at it, and then you realize as you read it all this profound knowledge that you found and stuff. But I agree, it is human nature is to look ahead, and it's always
I'm
like,
going to give you my coin collection,
Yeah.
which is 4 coins that are worth $3.18.
yeah. But human nature, we do this in almost everything we do.
Oh, yeah,
We look
everything.
at best case scenario.
Yep.
We're almost always the best case scenario.
Or we go the other way and we go worst case.
Or the worst case.
There's nowhere in the middle.
Yeah, that is true. I try to do both. I try to find the worst and the best and go in the middle. But it's funny. I read that a few times, and I never caught that God spoke to her first and then spoke to Elijah. That's kind of so those little things you got to read it, read it, and read it.
So they both come with these expectations, but both of them have the willingness when it's a crazy instruction. When God says to do this, and you go, how is that going to help my situation? And or I expect this is how this is going to help my situation. And then we get there, and it's nothing like we expected. Mm-hmm. So what do we do then? When we get to what are we talking about?
Nobody can see me. Okay.
When we get to the end result, we get to the place where God sent us to, and it's not the way we expected. And it's like, okay, do we pull tail and run? Mm-hmm. Do we say, okay, God didn't provide, he didn't show up.
Our expectations don't line up with the events that he has willed into place.
Correct. And are we going to stay in? Are we going to stay with what God instructed us to do? Are we going to just run from that and say, okay, it didn't work and go? Or are we going to stay in and then inquire of the Lord, okay, Lord, what are you telling us to do? What's happening here? I don't understand. Give me some instruction. I'll give you another story. Was the rich young ruler came to Jesus and said, how do I get born again? How do I get saved? And Jesus said, well, you need to obey all the commandments. You need to do these things. And he says, I've done them since my youth. And what do I do? And Jesus said, well, you lack one thing. And he says, you need to give to the poor. You need to learn to be generous and to do these things. And it wasn't what he expected. It wasn't, he had an expectation that before he came on his way to Jesus, he's like, oh, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, he's going to say this, he's going to do all these things. And Jesus didn't meet his expectations, and he turned and went away. And he went away disappointed. He went away sorrowful. I think the scripture says sorrowful, but he went away. Actually, the context is he went away mad.
Well, and you got to look in like today's situation, like how it applies to today is how many times do we as humans go to God and we feel that he didn't answer us or he didn't hear us because it's not what we expect to happen.
Right. It didn't
My
happen.
healing didn't happen exactly how I wanted it to, or it was contrary to my beliefs on the earth. Like some people are, anti-medication or something, or anti-doctor or something like that. So if it doesn't align with their belief, they're going to stop it before it even goes that far, where healing may come through that, or healing may come through laying on of hands or something. And my church doesn't lay on hands, so we can't do that. It's like, so your beliefs aren't aligning with the will of God, and we shut off that revenue stream, that flow, that water pipe of God, if we want to call it, and we just stop. We just say, I don't want to do it anymore. And instead of being like Elijah and the widow, and even the ravens, and just following what God says, and just going, even though the flesh wants, and it's not like we have to blindly follow that blind faith that's used sometimes, that the bad word we don't like using. It's not blind faith, it's pure faith, so that we just go, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, it's against, but we know it's from God. Like there's moments in life, we've talked about this before, when we know it's coming from God, and who are we to say, no, I don't want to? And that's the practice we need to get into, and it's hard. I mean, I know it's hard for me. So.
Well, when we talk about faith principles, how faith works, is that if we purely just apply faith principles to events in our life, we can miss God. And let's just look at Elijah here. He's at the brook, and the brook dries up, and what's his options here? He goes to the Lord, and the Lord says, okay, go to Zarephath. I'm going to command you. Or he could have not inquired of God and just proclaimed to the stream, to the brook, flow with water, and just, did all of his did all of his faith confessions.
We didn't exist back then.
Yeah, we didn't exist back then. And we can declare all these things, and we can say, well, I believe that this is going to happen, or God has
mustard seed faith. We'll make this brook, and it's these things that
where God has acted this way. He has provided in this way before, so that I'm putting my faith to that He'll provide that way again, and we miss it. And if he would have stayed there at the brook, he would have died.
Because he didn't go to God in that situation. Right. And I think that's what we do sometimes, is like, this method worked for me last year, or the last time I had a relapse, or whatever the case may be. So I'll just do that same path. And it's like, that may not be what God's calling you to do right now. And that's why we need to have that personal relationship with God. That's the key.
Now you think about, at this time, there's widow women everywhere. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's not an unusual thing. And in Jerusalem, there is widow women who are Jewish that have a covenant. This is Zarephath. This is not the right town. You know what I mean?
Right.
From Elijah's perspective, we're going to the wrong way. We're going in the wrong direction. We're not in the right town. We're not with the right people. We're not with my people. Mm-hmm. And so he could have said, well, I don't trust this. I'm going to go over here.
I think I'll have better luck where my
I believe God will provide for me here, but that's not what God said. And so it's more important, it is so crucial that we be led by the Spirit of God, that we hear what He has said, because He told Elijah every step of the way, this is what I have done. I have, the brook will give you water, you can drink of the brook, and I've commanded the ravens to feed you. And you got to hear that. You know what I mean? When God gives an instruction, you got to be in a place you got to position yourself to hear what God's saying. And you're not going to always understand what he's saying. Like, I'm sure Elijah's like, ravens?
Like ravens, yeah.
Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Well, it's not like he was a
I've
bird
never seen a
keeper or-
raver
yeah.
bring anything to anyone.
Yep.
They consume everything right on the spot. As soon as they get it, they're gonna carry it away so that the other ravens don't steal it from them.
And like the brook. It's like, well, that makes sense. I'm gonna
Yeah.
go to the brook, drink from the brook. Okay, good to go.
Yeah.
And it's like, but that for me, that might have been like, I feel like I would have listened to God on the whole, go to meet a widow, go to Ziathus, meet a widow. I was like, oh, all right, still a little bit different, but
Yeah.
okay. But the raven one, I may not have been too well at listening to God. Like I'm not going to sit here and say I wouldn't, because I don't know in the situation, the prayer that he might have been talking to God with, but that would have been a crazy one for
Yeah.
me. But it's like,
But here's the thing: would Elijah have died? Maybe he would have disobeyed, or not disobeyed. He just wouldn't have followed the instruction, which I guess is disobedience. Yeah. But he would have said, "Okay, I don't trust this. I'm going to go make another way." So he's going to go provide for himself somehow.
instantly you're dead. You're going to hell. Well, that's what we might think sometimes, but it's not necessarily the case.
No, because we all do that. If that was true, we'd all be dead
nobody
and
left
in
on
hell.
earth.
There'd be nobody left. We would, because we
but,
all.
But for some reason, when we chastise other people, that's kind of the infliction we put
Yeah.
on. It's like, you didn't listen to God, going to hell.
Going to-
Done. And it's like, well, wait a second. It doesn't work that way. Sin is sin. You didn't listen, but I just.
But he would have had to toil. He would have had to work to figure out how to take care of himself, and he wouldn't have done it very well. He would have been in bad shape. Mm-hmm. Just naturally, physically, emotionally,
like everybody
everywhere.
else, like the majority of people that maybe weren't talking to God.
But when he's being led by the Spirit, when he's obeying what God tells him to do, now he's flourishing. Now he's eating well. He's being provided for well. And when things run out of that provision, when the brook dries up, now God says, okay, I'm going to send you somewhere else. Now let's go over here. And so it's like, okay, when the brook dried up, he had a choice now. He's like, do I listen to God and do what he instructs me to do, or I got to go make a way. I got to go figure something out. I've got to go figure out how I'm going to feed and hydrate myself. I'm not going to go to God and ask him. And this is the important thing, that just because you've done it a certain way in the past doesn't mean that's how God's going to do it this time, or how he's instructing you to do it this time. It is so important to inquire of the Lord every time, to go to him. And God set this up this way because he wants relationship. He wants fellowship with us. He wants us to inquire of him so that he can lead us and speak to us and be engaged with us and be a part of our life. If we don't engage with him, then we're just going on our own fear, our own strength, our own ability, our own wisdom, and we're going to fall flat in our face. It's not going to take very long, and we're going to, not be successful at doing that. Yeah. And if we rely on the Lord, then he will lead us. King David, when he was, before he was king and after he was king, every time there was an interaction with some other country that wants to attack them and do something, he would always go to the Lord and say, Lord, okay, what do you want us to do?
Right, every single time.
And a couple of times it was the same instruction as the time before. And so after he gets the same instruction a couple of times, most of us would think, well, it's going to be the same instruction this time. But David didn't rely on that. He went back to the Lord and say, Lord, this is happening again. What do you want us to do? And the Lord said, no, I want you to go over here and wait, and you watch me destroy your enemy. You watch me do the work.
Imagine if he wouldn't have listened and went into battle.
It would have been a slaughter, but it would have been a slaughter the wrong way.
Well, and that's kind of always my thing, was whenever I talk to, this could be young and old Christians, but I find it more in Christians that have been doing a certain mission in the church for many years. They're kind of on autopilot with it. Mm-hmm. Not that it's a bad thing, but it's like, have you ever went back to God and was like, am I still supposed to be leading children's ministry?
Often,
am I still supposed to be leading, like you've done praise and worship before in your past? It's like, you knew, you were wise enough to talk to God, and he's like, hey, I want you to become a pastor or an assistant pastor. I don't know the exact path he went, but it's like, and then start your own church and all this. So it's like, if you never check in with God on these certain situations, if you just autopilot. Now, I would say that God sometimes interjects and reminds you of things and puts things in front of you that gets you think, but you could easily reject it. Somebody offers you a position or something, you go, oh, I'm good. I'm the worship leader. I'm good. Well, how do you know that interaction didn't come from God and wanted you to just go home and think about it? And it's like, I want you to step off the stage, maybe be behind it, or start a church, or whatever the case may be. And that's one thing. That's why if we have that constant connection, if that's our goal, that's if I had to say one thing is like my Christian path in life, what's my goal? And it's like we could always like, oh, to be a better Christian, but what's that mean? Oh, to be a good donator to charities or whatever these things. I'd love to become a this or that. My goal is to increase that connection with God, because I think everything else comes from that.
Oh,
how can I get closer? How can
Definitely.
how can we speak the same language? How can I can understand what he's saying better, that kind of stuff, and then not make it a challenging thing or a hard thing. And that's my goal, I guess we would call it.
It's like Elijah. He could have left the brook too soon before it ran out. Like he could have seen the handwriting on the wall, like it's getting low, it's getting smaller and smaller. Well, I better go somewhere else.
Yeah, or he
And,
could have
and
woke up.
and I've had those instances in my church life, if you want to call it that, where things were drying up, and I'm like, Lord, I went and inquired, like, what do I do here? I would like to go do this, or I'd like to go do that. And the Lord's like, did I change your assignment? Or did I give you any further instruction? And no, so stay put. Do what I instructed you to do.
And you got to think of like how
Don't run off
the world may have tried to influence Elijah, or Satan may have tried to influence Elijah. Imagine if God told him, hey, when the brook dries up, and say, morning he woke up and it was dry. So that's his cue from hey, go to Zarephath.
Now I got to look at it to make sure I'm pronouncing it.
And what if he was like, well, I'm a little tired.
Zarephath.
I'll leave in a couple hours. I'm going to sleep in.
Yeah.
My alarm didn't go off. Whatever the case may be. I know it's obviously he probably didn't have an alarm, but I'm saying in today's
Yeah, the ravens squawking at us.
Yeah, ravens were waking him up.
Breakfast.
But it's like, imagine if he would have, like the influences, the outside influences, if he would have listened to them and missed the widow meeting at that specific point. Because imagine if she wouldn't have been there in that moment. Like, how would he have found her again? Now, granted, he could have missed it. Maybe prayed there, talked to God again. He's like, okay, walk here, wherever this, and find her there. So God will come back around, but it's like it all depends on your relationship and how willing you are to listen to him.
It does.
I'm not,
Definitely does.
I normally don't do this, but we had a comment on a prior video that has to do with this. That's why I'm bringing it up. It was about tithing, and the comment was that I'm a long time Christian, so I'm guessing years. Whoever this person was, they didn't have like a name. It was like a fictitious name. I think it was like, anyways. And he says, I'm a long-time Christian, I've never tithed, but I'm still blessed. Can you explain that, or something of that nature? It was like, I don't tithe, but I'm still blessed by God. And I replied, as Faith Connection, so I hope I'm not going to get yelled at live on screen. But my take on it is like, it doesn't mean if you don't tithe, you're not going to be blessed, or God's taking away from you. You're taking away from yourself in a sense. Like, you could still be, how do you know what the top amount of blessing that God has for you? So yeah, you could be at a level 10 blessing, if we want to put numbers on it, and it's pretty awesome. But then if you tithe, listen to commandments, it's like, I sin. Imagine if I didn't sin. Imagine if I went to bed on time, how better I'd feel in the morning. It's like I'm not dying because of not doing things. Right. It's like, so that's how I kind of explain it. It's like, it's a command. God commands you to do something. It's in there. There is no ands, ifs, or buts. It says tithe. Now, and that wasn't even the hang up. I thought the hang up would have been where to tithe. That's usually the hang up for people. But this one was just tithing in general. And it's like, God asked you to do it. Give back 10%. We can cut strings or cut hair, split hairs, I guess is cut strings. Cut strings. We'll cut strings. You can split hairs on where to tithe, and I can understand some people will have a different, but it's like tithing is a part. So for that blessing, it's like you can still be blessed. God's not taking away all your blessings, and you're living in the pit of despair because you didn't tithe, or you didn't give alms, or you didn't sow into good soil, or you did. There's all these things that we can call. So I thought it kind of applies here, because what we were saying about how if you don't listen, you could still survive in the real world, but it's better when you go with
Right.
his path.
If Elijah hadn't done what God told him to do and he didn't meet the widow woman, would God have taken care of the widow woman in some other way?
Especially if she was listening.
Right.
Then, of course, he's going to send her somebody else.
Right. But and it may not have been in the same way. It may not have been as well. She may not have, survived as well. Same thing with Elijah. Had he not obeyed the instruction of God, would he made it through the drought and the famine time? And would God have provided for him so that he could get through that? God's not a vengeful God like you don't obey me, squash.
He may have gone to another town and found some rich lady and got married and had, and lived a good life. It doesn't mean, but was he living the will of God?
Right.
And that to me is my blessing, not how much possessions I have or how healthy I am. And I feel like those come along with the will of God.
Yep.
But my desire, whenever like the comment was, I still get blessings. My blessings is whenever I know I'm in the will of God.
Yeah. Because Scripture tells us it rains on the just and the unjust. God's blessing, His provision of this earth, of His, just His blessing to mankind is there for those that mock Him, that ridicule God, that say God doesn't exist, that
It's
say,
like
well, He exists, but He's no good, that He's
It's like bringing food to a picnic. Even the bad people eat your potato salad. You know what I mean? It's like everybody gets to eat it. But
here's the thing is that within the family of God, there is a level of provision and blessing. I mean, we can talk about a whole lot of different things here that is unique to us as children of God, and it's also unique to those that believe it and receive it. Right, Alicia? You got to be not only just a believer, but you got to be a receiver. We had a good time Tuesday night, buddy. She was preaching to me good.
Well, we have unbelievers and unreceivers.
Right.
That's next week.
Next week. But the difference of that we can be in the family of God and we can be blessed because we are a child of God, and yet God says, "I have so much more that I want you to have." And He's speaking that to every child of God, every believer.
Even the best Christian we know still they've reached a plateau, they've reached a glass ceiling, whatever you want to call it, that they can go more and more and more.
Right.
I believe. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm in that category, so I don't know yet. But it's like I feel like we as humans, we slow ourselves down. We stop ourselves. We hold ourselves back. We're I think the biggest. I think non-Christians blame God a lot for problems. Christians blame Satan a lot. Where I think the real blame needs to be focused more on ourselves as humans. And it's like we follow our own plans all the time. We foil our own, sabotage ourselves all the time. I do it all the time. And it's like, but we're like, well, God must not have wanted that to happen.
How many events in my life I look back on and go, if I had only done.
Yeah, if I would have put this money here.
I knew that this was an opportunity. This was something that God was leading me to, and I chose not to do it. And boy, if I had done, and I'm thinking of things right now. But anyhow, the last thing that I would say that this story, that this account teaches us for us today, is how does faith work? How do we have faith like Elijah and like the widow to just obey the voice of God, obey what He instructs you to do? How do we have that kind of faith? And that kind of faith begins with knowing what God has said. Mm-hmm. If we know what God has said, then we have a foundation, a place to put our faith on, that now we can go forward with in faith. And Jesus told us to have faith in God, and it's that faith can move mountains, that if we believe we can receive anything, that whatever we say we can have. And it's all Mark 11, 22 through 25. And how do we know that? How do we have that kind of faith? How do we have that kind of assurance and that confidence that we can step out onto that? And we got to come back to, what did God say? Mm-hmm. If we know what God has said, then we can rely on that and we can trust that. And that's all Elijah and the widow woman did. Even the ravens, that's what they did. They just did what God told them to do. And, Elijah heard what God said. God said, go to the brook and I'll take care of you. And then he says, go to Zarephath and a widow woman will take care of you there. He tells the widow woman, man of God's coming and he's going to help you get through this drought and get through this situation. And every time you've got to know what God says about it. Mm-hmm. When sickness comes into your body, what has God said about when sickness comes into my body? And when financial provision or finances aren't right, and what do I do? And we got to go, what does God say about that? We got to know what God has said about it.
And we look at, like, you might look at like somebody that's a non-Christian or a young Christian, and they may look at people that, Christians that are doing this on a regular mm-hmm. basis. And they go, well, why do you keep doing that? How do you have faith like that? Where does that, how do you know it's going to turn out right? It's because the people that have been doing it realize that the outcome is always better when it's with God than when it's with not. Right. We have failed so many times as humans, as young Christians, non-Christians, defiant Christians, whatever label you want to put on there. We have failed by ourselves so many times that whenever we started realizing when we give it to God and we listen to what He has commanded us, or we followed His word, the outcome was better every single time. Yep. So then we go, that's the pattern I want. If it didn't work, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking about this. We wouldn't have, it's like, people aren't going to keep failing and then go, oh, I'm okay with that. I'm going to still do that. It's like, so obviously, if you aren't sure, if you don't know how to talk to God yet, if you haven't received Christ in your life, look at the people that have and you wonder why. Why does their life seem to be a little bit better? Why do they smile a little bit more? I wonder why. Because it works. Because we have fleshed it out. Because we found God. God found us, and it works. Yep. That's all more I can say. It's like, that's what we were talking the other day, because I look at people that aren't listening to God and I'm like, why not? And I used to be one of them people, so it's like I'm questioning even what I did, which is funny because we think we know it all as humans, but it's like we do it because we know it works.
Yep. Well, you go back to the tithing issue. Do you want your finances to be better? Then let's find out what God said about them. Mm-hmm. And we've studied it out. And we understand that we got to start out with point number one is you got to be a tither, but through tithing can come great provision from God, not so that you can, have every new thing that you want to have, though you can, but it's so that you can now be generous. If you are not a tither and not a giver, and you're just keeping what you have, and you're more worried about you and your son, like this little widow woman, if she would have said, well, I can't give because I don't have anything, then that's all she would ever had. Mm-hmm. But because she obeyed God, because she gave that first part to the man of God, and in essence, a tithe, mm-hmm. and she obeyed God and did that, now God said, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to provide for you radically. And now she can be generous and be a radical giver. She can be generous to other people.
I look with tithing, it's this like channel of obedience that we open up. It's like plugging headphones into a device or something. It's like through that act of tithing and that act of obedience, that what I'm being told, I have this channel opened up to God that says, hey, because like it's tough. Like I've been in financial situations as a tithing Christian to where I go, can I do this? Like, boy, I could really use this chunk of money that I'm taking over here. I would love to do other things with it. Mm-hmm. But it's like, but that's not what I'm called. Like that's the last place I would ever attack. Like,
but have you lacked for anything?
And that's the crazy part, because I'll feel in the moment that I'm about to lack.
Yep.
In that, when it comes into my head, it won't be missed. If I just, instead of 10%, I'll do 5%. Nobody would even know. But then I get that check. No person would know. He would know.
Oh, you know.
and I would know. And it's like, but then the instant I go, and I pray about, I go, I always say, Satan, take your hands off my money in Jesus' name. And it's like, and I because I knew that's where this was coming from, this temptation not to do it. So then I go back to God. I said, nope, done. Hands off of it. I'm sorry. My bad. And then like the next day, or that day, or within that situation, it flowers into this awesome thing. I didn't lack. The past due invoices are paid in full, or these things happen, and it's like, man, I'm glad I followed that. You know, it's like, because then I look back, like how you said you look back at things you should have done. I look back at things like, what if I wouldn't have done it?
Yeah. Oh,
You know?
yeah. There's a lot of
And it's
those
like,
days.
yeah, it's like, what if I wouldn't have done that? It's like, how bad would it have gotten? Would I have survived? Probably. You know, maybe I'd had a late fee tacked onto something, but I'd have survived. I'd have made that money up somewhere else, you know? And it's like, so that's what it's like whenever that comment says, I still get blessed. It's like, of course you do.
Because we've got a good God.
You're in America. Right
well,
there, you're blessed.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and we've got a good God.
Yeah, and then we got a good.
He's not going to let any of his children, you know.
But how do you know what the max amount of blessings that you could receive?
Right.
It's like, maybe you're at a level 5, and God wants you at a level 90, and all you're missing, and maybe you are a good Christian, except for tithing. Yeah. Maybe that's the piece you're like king.
And
in
tithing, you're
the king that we were just talking about. So
David?
Yeah, King David. He was missing. Was it King David that came to Jesus and hey, you need to give? No, it wasn't King David. It was
the rich young ruler.
The young ruler. Yeah, the rich young ruler. That was the one thing he was missing, which was kind of like tithing.
Yeah.
And it's like, but he was a rich young ruler. So he was young and rich and ruling. That's pretty good. If you ask me, he was blessed. But he was missing that one thing.
Lacking.
But he thought he was a Christian, and he knew he was lacking. He got word that he was lacking.
Well, so he was a Jew. He was in the covenant. He was part of God's people. But he knew something was lacking in his life.
And we all have that feeling.
And the tithing.
Well, I don't anymore.
The tithing doesn't just open up financial things. We talk about it on that level so much that we're out of time. I don't want to get into, we could tell stories all night long. But, it may be in a relationship. Maybe it's in your marriage or in your family relationship that things just aren't right and you don't know what to do. And God says, give it to me. And he's not just talking about your money. He's talking about you and everything you are. Mm-hmm. And when we give ourselves to him, and he can lead us and he can direct us and he can speak to us and say, here's what I say about this. And now we can put our faith on top of that. And now we can see him work things out, that relationships, our physical body healing, whatever can turn around. Mm-hmm. And we can come back to a good place. We can go, man, I am so much more blessed now than when I was trying to do it on my own. But when I start doing it God's way of doing things, now I can see the provision of God. Not only does he bless me and give to me, but he pulls out all that other negative influence. He takes away Satan's plans of trying to destroy us if we will obey him and be led by him.
Amen.
All right.
I think we're good for tonight, guys. We'll go.
It's like Sunday morning. Sometimes I just got to shut up.
It's one of them things, though. It's like it's so awesome to talk about our awesome God, and it's like, and that to me, like I look forward to Sundays. I look forward to Thursdays. I look forward to when we get fellowship groups. We've actually me and my wife have been staying with Melissa on Sunday for like 25 minutes waiting for a video to finish. And we'll just talk about stuff. And it's like this new little fellowshipping program that we've created just for 15, 20 minutes. We like doing it. But anyways, guys, we're going to ramble if we don't cut this off. Thank you so much for tuning in to Faith Connection Live, episode number 84. Share and like if you liked it. If you have any comments or questions, we've talked about a lot of stuff tonight. So if you have any questions, put them down in the comments below. We'll bring them up in another episode or reply to you personally or in the comments or something like that. But our goal is to share the good news of Jesus Christ and to fellowship with each other. We can't do that without you. Faith Connection wouldn't be a thing without you, the viewer. We would just be talking to nothing. So, as always, good night. God bless.
We'll see you next time.